You also, though, write for the Washington Post, quote, "What happened in Uvalde was horrifying and demands some effort at preventing similar attacks. But in part, thanks to the enormous amount of attention such attacks received, it also risks presenting gun deaths in the U.S. as something other than a norm that usually escapes the public eye. Ending incidents like the one in Uvalde is obviously important, but there would still be more than 100 gun deaths a day on average in the United States, most of them people taking their own lives." This is a conversation we had while I was in Uvalde with, survivors about the fact that we very often focus on these mass shootings, and that clearly is a part of this conversation. But there are also people who are victims of everyday gun violence in this country, literally every day. What kind of broader conversations do we need to be having? And does that then serve the possibility of bringing additional people into the fold?
Well, I mean, it's a much, much harder question, right? I mean, there's so many guns in the United States. Even if there were an assault weapons ban that went into effect tomorrow, there's still probably about 20 million AR-15 style rifles in the United States. Those are not generally the sorts of weapons people use to take their own lives. There are even more handguns that are sold than AR-15 style rifles. I mean, there's just an enormous number of guns in this country. And there's no path. There's simply no political path toward reducing that number and toward having fewer people have guns in their households. I mean, there's so many studies that show having a gun in your household leads to these negative repercussions, that there are correlations here between the number of guns that people own and the likelihood that they die of gun violence. This is all so well established, but the only question is, what do we actually, forgive me as a motorcycle goes by outside, there's no actual solution to reducing that number. And until you do that, you still are going to have this underlying current, this underlying hum of people taking their own lives, of having these firearms available for them to commit acts of gun violence against themselves or against others. And that is, even as hard as the question of things like Uvalde is, that's a much, much harder question that they're not even close to starting to try and tackle.
It's one of the things we've been hearing now from activists, from advocates, that yes, there is the legislative piece, but there also is a cultural piece, and that cultural piece is going to take a lot more time.